Welcome. The mystery over the whereabouts of the American whistleblower Edward Snowden has been further complicated today by the Russian government saying that he has not crossed its border. The United States is desperate to know where Snowden is. He is, after all, the man responsible for a huge leak of its national security information. Today, both Russia and China have hit back at American accusations that they have assisted the whistleblower. Nick Charles has the latest on this developing story.
They seek him here, they seek him there, and that elusive Mr. Snowden is also leaving a trail of ruffled relations in his wake. When yesterday's Aeroflot flight to Havana took off, there was just an empty seat where the fugitive former intelligence contractor was expected to be. The best guess is that he's still in Moscow, possibly at an airport hotel, awaiting a decision from Ecuador on his asylum request. But at the Russian Foreign Ministry, Washington's efforts to pressure Moscow into helping to apprehend Edward Snowden have provoked only a testy response.
We
have nothing to do with Mr. Snowden or his relationship with the American judiciary, nor his movements around the world. He did not cross Russia's borders, and we find the attempts to accuse Russia of breaking US law almost of a conspiracy, along with the threats against us, groundless and unacceptable.
Last week's awkward close encounter between Presidents Obama and Putin at the G8 summit showed that their relations were already going through a rough patch. In contrast, this was Mr. Obama with his Chinese counterpart just a week before that, at a relaxed relationship-building get-together in California.
Terrific.
But now the Americans have also expressed their displeasure because Edward Snowden was able to leave Hong Kong when Washington was trying to have him detained.
We are just not buying that this was a technical decision by a Hong Kong immigration official. This was a deliberate choice by the government to release a fugitive despite a valid arrest warrant, and that decision unquestionably has a negative impact on the U.S.-China relationship.
From Beijing, though, again, an angry rejection. A foreign ministry spokeswoman called the US accusations groundless and unacceptable. So the reverberations continue from this international manhunt, as well as the arguments over Edward Snowden's original leaking of the details of sensitive US and British surveillance programs. Nick Childs, BBC News.
Well, with me now is our security correspondent, Frank Gardner. Frank, we were having a very similar conversation to this one 24 hours ago when we weren't sure where Edward Snowden was then.
And we're still not sure, but I mean, let's stick to the facts. We know that he boarded a plane on Sunday from Hong Kong to Moscow because he was seen on that plane. So he arrived in Moscow's Sheremetyevo airport sometime late on Sunday. He was booked on a flight the next day to Cuba, but didn't go on it. Now, the Ecuadorian ambassador's car was seen going up to the airport terminal buildings there, but he himself, Edward Snowden, has not been seen. He has lodged a request for asylum, political asylum in Ecuador, which they say they're looking at. So there are three places that he could be. He's either in some kind of transit status in Russia, because the Russians say he has not crossed our borders. That doesn't mean to say he's not on Russian territory. He doesn't have a passport. The US have revoked his passport. He's got refugee papers from the government of Ecuador. Now, the Russians are saying those have not been stamped, so he could still be in transit, or he could be inside Russia. If I were the Russians, I'd want to learn an awful lot from him. I'd want to debrief the hell out of him.
Would you want to prevent him leaving the country?
Well, not necessarily. The Americans will want to shut him up before he reveals any more secrets. But the Russians could possibly, theoretically, trade him for somebody else.
Frank, thanks very much for the moment. Frank Gardner, our security correspondent. Well, alongside the mystery over Edward Snowden's location is the debate over the merits of what he did. Is he, as the US sees it, a traitor or alternatively a champion of freedom? With me is Henry Porter, who's written best-selling books on espionage, including one, interestingly, with a plot not dissimilar to that of Edward Snowden, the whistleblower. Henry Porter. So did you see this coming then?
I think what I saw coming was the extent of surveillance that democracies go in for. I think I got that absolutely right. I didn't envisage a character like Edward Snowden, who in many respects is rather heroic. I think over the next few weeks, as things develop, he will come to be seen as far less heroic, certainly in America.
Why do you say that?
Well, I think originally he was a whistleblower. He now appears like following what Frank said, appears to be on Russian soil, and that is not a good thing, because let's not forget we've only seen a very, very small amount of what Edward Snowden had access to, and had access to for a very long time. So naturally, the Americans will be very worried, as the British will be, what he's got in his head, or maybe even in hard drives. So that will move him from the heroic whistleblower to somebody who is regarded as pretty much unquestionably a traitor.
And of course, I guess your perception of Edward Snowden and what he's done varies on where in the world you owe your own particular allegiance. I mean, those who have doubts about Western governments and their surveillance will immediately have difficulties with him.
That's a clever point. I mean, I think also if you're here in Britain and America and you have a regard for the democracy and the level of surveillance that appears to be going on legally over the last few years, you will also have also regard him with a certain amount of favour. I mean, it is a very ambiguous situation. It's difficult to draw a line now.
But is that how you regard him, with a certain amount of favour?
I do, for the reason that he's told us how our society was functioning and we didn't know it. For somebody like me who really does feel that it's important that we, the public, know how our democratic institutions are functioning. And we didn't, and clearly there was not much oversight over how GCHQ and NSA were, what they were doing. I think it's very important, it's revealing for democracy.
So your issue is not necessarily the surveillance, it's what we're told about the surveillance. I mean, many people might argue that, let's be realistic about this, in this day and age we are under all sorts of surveillance, whether it's by Facebook or other companies we use on the internet or our governments.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Facebook-Google argument is that, you know, there's a difference between what you give away voluntarily and what the government takes from you. And it's as different as charity and tax. So I think one can just push that aside. Just because you say things on Facebook and on Twitter and so forth, it doesn't mean to say that you want your entire life inspected by the government. I think the crucial thing about this has been the power of the two big Western watchers, GCHQ and NSA, is to go anywhere in the internet, pick out anything. They hope, apparently, to get 100% access to the internet. And that's quite a frightening prospect if you're a democracy and you do feel that that democracy relies on opposition, relies on people to form...
You may find it frightening, but it has the noble aim of keeping us all safer in a very difficult time.
Does it have that aim? I'm not sure. I mean, I'm certain that is a pretext, but I'm not sure that's the aim. I think the aim is, without being too paranoid about this, is to get a firm control of the internet and therefore a firm control over the people in Britain.
Are you actually saying then that intelligence gathering is a pretext for another kind of surveillance?
No,
entirely?
I think they meld very easily. And what I'm saying is, I think it has been used by the NSA and GCHQ to argue for great funds and great powers. The loss of life to terror has been enormous and dreadful, but just compare it to the loss of life caused by gun crime in America. I mean, I don't know what it is, 1.1 million in the last 40 years have been killed by people have been killed in America by guns. No response at all in America to dealing with that horror and that terror. But so I'm just saying that to point out that actually there does appear to be another agenda here, which is to gain control of the internet. For what purposes later on? Let's not forget that we're at the beginning of this age of the internet and surveillance. What will happen in 10, 15 years' time when we have governments which we may not like, or may be a lot less benign than the ones we have in the West?
Well, there's no doubt that Edward Snowden has reignited a whole debate about surveillance and the use of it right around the world. Henry Porter, thank you very much indeed. Now, let's turn to a political act that has never before been seen in the Gulf.